Hello, Fuse Nation. My name is Alex Fuse, the host of Fusion News. Today is February 14th, 2017. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. On tonight's show, Jared Diamond from the Wall Street Journal. So, Jared, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, this is your first time on my show, but this is my second time interviewing you. You probably don't remember this, but back in 2015, you were a guest on Big Board Sports with Roger Weiland here in upstate New York, and I was co-hosting that day with Roger, and you were on that day, and I asked you a few questions about the Mets that year when they were in the playoffs.
That's funny. Don't remember that, but I'm sure it was a great interview. The fact that I don't remember it's probably a good thing. If it means nothing bad happened, that would make me remember it.
Yeah, that's right. So, Jared, of course, you covered the Yankees and the Mets a little last year, and now this year you'll be moving all around. So, of course, for the upstate New York baseball fans, of course, the Yankees won the spring trading today. The pitchers and catchers did. And Joe Girardi held his press conference and said Tanaka will be, potentially the starter pitcher, of course, if nothing crazy happens over spring training. So, is Masahiro Tanaka going to be that ace the Yankees have you really trusted in him over the past few weeks or years?
Yeah, I think you have to feel confident in him. He's the one arm in that rotation that you actually feel comfortable with. Tanaka was really excellent last year. I don't think he got enough credit for just how well he pitched. Last year, he threw 199 two-thirds innings. The ERA was 3.07. Pitching in the American League East, that's very impressive. He really was a legitimate Cy Young candidate for time of last year, and really didn't get maybe the credit. I think he's shown that whatever's up with his elbow no longer has to be at the front of the conversation. We're all aware that could change at any time, but I think he's proven that he could pitch in spite of it and be successful. And if you're the Yankees, you need him to replicate that performance or more if you're going to have a chance, just considering the question marks in the rotation beyond him.
Now, Brian McCann was really Masahiro Tanaka's only catcher that he saw with the Yankees until about halfway through the season last year. Now, with Brian McCann going to the Astros, do you think it's going to be put on more of a stress for Gary Sanchez to really work with Tanaka over the Yankee season this year, or do you think that's just going to be a side factor that won't bother Tanaka at all?
I don't foresee that being an issue. I don't think that Brian McCann had any sort of specific influence on Masahiro Tanaka. Certainly they had a good rapport, but I think Gary Sanchez showed at times last year down the stretch when he was left with the team that the pitchers worked fine with him. I don't foresee that being much of an issue.
Now we'll switch gears and talk some Mets. Of course, their number one offseason goal was to get back Yoenis Cespedes, and that's what they got done. And also, hopefully, the starter rotation can stay healthy for the Mets as another key factor. What other factor could really play in part for the Mets to really go far this season and potentially go deep into the playoffs?
For the Mets, look, it all comes down to one thing. I think we all know what that thing is. It's just pitching health. If everyone stays healthy, they have a chance to be a legitimate World Series contender. They have all the pieces you need on paper. They have 7 legitimately good, if not excellent, starting pitchers. Doesn't always happen. Last year, the Mets struggled all year long with keeping their guys healthy. This year, they believe Matt Harvey is going to be back to being Matt Harvey, Jacob deGrom. You hope Noah Syndergaard stays as healthy as he's been, but it's always a roll of the dice. You just can't predict it. On paper, like I said, they are set up to be, again, a legitimate playoff contender, maybe more. But all year long, everyone's to be holding their breath, just not knowing how those arms are going to hold up.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. And, that's one thing we have to keep our eyes on, in the next few weeks. And also, of course, the Red Sox, they got Chris Sale this offseason and getting David Price last offseason. This Red Sox team really looks like they're going to be winning the AL East and really, potentially going far in the playoffs as well. Do you think any other team in the AL East, has a shot to beat the Red Sox out, the Blue Jays, Orioles, probably not the Rays, and probably not the Yankees either? But what other teams do you see in that division to potentially come out on top?
Oh, goodness. I think Tampa Bay is definitely the sort of dark horse in the AL East. They've made some really good strides of getting slowly but surely back to where they were, 7-8 years ago. I do like what they've done. Of course, Boston is the team to beat in the AL East. It would be a surprise, I think, at this point for anyone to finish ahead of them, barring injuries. But Toronto's going to be there again. But I think the one team, like I said, keep your eye on are the Rays. I think that they are not getting the recognition that Boston's going to get. They're kind of flying under the radar. But I like what they've done. I think they're very close to being competitive again.
Maybe you'll get to go down to Tampa and enjoy some of those games in the warm weather, right?
Nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah. Now, of course, you are traveling all around covering the whole MLB for the Wall Street Journal. And, last week, the MLB said that they're going to start doing testing in the lower levels of the MLB, putting a shadow runner on second base in extra innings to see if this potentially could be a rule they do in the majors. Now, I had to ask you, what are your thoughts on this new rule that potentially we could see at the main major league level?
Look, there's a lot of new rules that we're hearing talking about, being discussed, changes to the strike zone, things like this. Obviously, like you mentioned, one big one is the extra innings possibility with the runner starting second base. And frankly, I think that's a terrible idea. But more importantly, I don't think anyone really thinks it's a good idea. That sort of just sounds like one of those ideas that get floated out there by baseball just to sort of, let's see how people respond to this one. And once pretty much everybody universally criticizes it, it gets sort of walked back. I don't expect to ever see something like that implemented in the major leagues, but I do give Rob Manfred and MLB credit because they are shown a willingness to try things, to come up with creative ideas, to try to speed up the game, to try to improve the pace. I do think that's an issue that baseball needs to continue to address. I don't think having a runner start second base in extra innings is the way to address it.
Yeah. Now, Jared, is that a rule that came from the softball league or no?
It's been used. When I wrote about it earlier, some people mentioned to me that it's been used in some other places. I'm not entirely sure the whole history of it, sort of where it started. I know it's been done before, but we're talking about Major League Baseball. You know, just because a rule has had some success in softball or in college or high school or wherever else does not mean that it's a good idea at the big league level. So I don't necessarily take much from that. I just think you got to finish the game the way you started. You shouldn't be changing the rules in extra innings. And frankly, I just don't think extra innings are baseball's biggest problem in terms of length of game. How many games go extra innings? It happens. It's not that it's rare, but it's not an everyday occurrence. I think MLB should be focusing more on how we speed up the first 9 innings instead of worrying about too much about how we speed up the 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Now, Jared, I have to ask you, if you were Rob Manfred, what would you do to try to speed up the game of baseball, to really try to get the younger crowd, the millennials, back into watching baseball? Because I know at my school, there's only a handful of people that really enjoy watching baseball the whole game from first inning to ninth inning. I'm one of those fans. But what would you do to try to get the fans back into the game of baseball?
Look, there's a few things that I think you could do to try to pick up the pace, but I don't think that's really the issue that's keeping young fans out. I think the pace of game is part of the problem, but I think a larger problem is just to do with the marketability of players. Like Mike Trout is the best player in the major leagues, and he is just not a star. And he's a star in the baseball world, but he's not a star sort of in the world at large the way, say, a Steph Curry is or Kevin Durant, some of the top NBA players. That's one thing the NBA has done really well over the last 10 years or so, or even longer, is market its players as cultural stars, not just stars in their sport. Baseball's done a terrible job of that. Bryce Harper is the guy that looks like he could potentially be that guy. Mike Trout has not really shown the personality or the willingness to have the personality to be that guy, and I think that's very, very important that fans have players they could relate to as sort of superstars. And in terms of pace of game, I'm of the belief that I would eliminate all coaches' mound visits. I don't think they're necessary. If you're going to have a coach go out to the mound, you're taking the pitcher out. You don't need that visit every inning. I think you could change, if you're going to have a pitcher come in mid-inning out of the bullpen, maybe only 1 or 2 warm-up pitches instead of 6 or 7. But these are just little fixes. And frankly, baseball's always been a sport that's slow and a sport that doesn't really need to be consumed by watching, innings 1 through 9. It's background noise. It's a game that you could pop in on. You could be multitasking and have baseball on in the background. That's something that's always been true of baseball. I don't think that needs to change. I just think that we need some players to really pick up that torch of superstars that can make baseball popular among young people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Now, Jared, last question before we wrap up this Feuzion News interview. You talked a little earlier about the Tampa Bay Rays being the dark horse in that division, but I have to ask, looking at the MLB overall, do you think the Cubs could win it back-to-back, or do you think it really is a dark horse to really potentially win the World Series this year? Who are your picks? Who are your teams that aren't going to make the playoffs at all, or who do you think possibly could win the World Series?
Well, look, right now on paper, with knowing injuries can and will be a huge factor, you have to feel like Chicago and Cleveland are the 2 best teams again and are the favorites to meet again in the World Series. I know that it rarely actually happens that way, but on paper, I do think those are the 2 best teams. I think the Indians are fantastic. I think we know how good the Cubs are. They showed it last year. In terms of a team that maybe not everyone's talking about, that I think has a real chance to get to the World Series, the team I really like is Houston. I love the Astros. I love what they did this offseason, bringing in Brian McCann and Carlos Beltran. Their lineup is just chock full of young stars, Alex Bregman, George Springer. Jose Altuve, to me, is an MVP candidate. He's that good of a player. What Houston needs is one more starting pitcher, and the good news for them is that they have the prospects to go and get it. I really would not be surprised if at some point, maybe even before the trade deadline, earlier on, the Astros go out and say, maybe we could go get Jose Quintana from the White Sox, who are in clear rebuilding mode, somebody like that. I think they're just really one good starting pitcher away from being a serious World Series contender. And because of the way they're set up, I wouldn't be surprised if they go get that piece, assuming they got off to a good start, which I think they will. Okay,
that sounds exciting, like an exciting season. I'm excited for this 2017 MLB season. Jared, I want to say thank you for taking the time to come on my show tonight. And where can the fans follow you on Twitter to read your tweets and read your articles as well?
Easy to find me. It's just at Jared Diamond on Twitter. And I tweet all my stories, or just go check out WSJ Sports. We do good stuff, not just baseball. We're covering all sports, and I think we're doing it pretty well.
Yeah, I love reading your articles. Thank you again, Jared, for coming on today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay, Fuse Nation, I just wrapped up that Feuzion News interview with Jared Diamond. Go back, watch all my other episodes with not this terrible voice. It's flu season here in upstate New York. Fuse Nation, thanks for watching. I'll be back live here at 4 p.m. 2 more shows later tonight. Oh, boy. Thank you for watching. I will see you at 4. Be kind to one another.